At this story, I want to first talk about a place. This place was called Nineveh, and this was a very, very big place. The city was large, the population was massive. There was a lot of people in this area called Nineveh. But over time, Nineveh actually started to become wicked. They started to disobey God. They started to sin. That's what that means. And they started to fight one another. They attacked one another. They weren't nice to one another. They would steal. They would disobey their parents. They did terrible things that actually the place started to become not a great place to live because sin was everywhere in that place. They had disobeyed God. And you know what? There was this man who was the king of Nineveh. He was a man of war. He would fight many, many battles, and you know what? He would win. He was a scary individual. You can see there, he's got big muscles. He was well known around the area because he had fought many, many wars. And you know what? There was this group of people that were actually kind of concerned because the king of Nineveh. He was a scary individual, and he would take many different areas. And these people here were called the people of Israel. And they started to get a little bit nervous. They thought, well, what if this king, this man of war, was going to take our area? And you know what? There was this man, or sorry, the people there, they actually worshipped God. And that was a big contrast to the people of Nineveh because you know what? They had actually worshipped stones and things that weren't alive, these idols. But the people of Israel, they had believed in God, a living God. You see, the things that Nineveh worshipped, they weren't living. Not the God of Israel or the God that we know, who made the world and created each one of us. Their gods were false. But the people of Israel, their God was true. He was alive. And so it was a big contrast. The people of Israel loved the true God. Nineveh, they rejected him. They didn't want anything to do with him. And there was this man named Jonah. Jonah was a man who God had used to give the people of Nineveh a message. And he was really what we call a prophet. He was the one that was going to deliver Nineveh a message. And so one day God came to Jonah, and he wanted to tell Jonah that he should go to Nineveh and he should tell them that God is going to destroy the place if they don't turn away from their wickedness. He was going to destroy the city if they were not going to turn away from the things that they were doing wrong. Well, Jonah, he was thinking about that, and he thought, well, that's not very pleasant. I don't want to have to warn the people of Nineveh that they're going to be destroyed. That's terrible. That's a terrible news to bring them. So, you know what? Jonah, he sat there, he thought about it, and you know what? He decided to ignore God. He actually started to walk in a different direction that God was. And he thought, you know what? You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to sail away from God. I don't want to have to deal with any of this. And so that's what he did. He got on this boat and he started heading for this place called Tarshish, foolishly thinking that he could hide from God. You know what the truth is? That none of us can hide from God. That's a lesson that all of us should know. And you'll see that in a bit. So that's what Jonah did. He got on a boat and he started to head off. Well, things were going smooth at first. He thought, good, I'm all good. God doesn't know where I am. I can hide from him. Well, that wasn't really the case. You know what started to happen? That ship that he took off in, that he was heading off to Tarshish with, waves and billows of waves started to hit the ship, and man, they were tugging on the ropes. They were hoping, oh, we are going to sink. And you know what? They probably would have sank. But what's kind of crazy is Jonah was at the bottom of the ship, and he was fast asleep. The ship, it was rocking back and forth, Jonah, sound asleep. So that was strange, but the storm kept coming. There was lightning, there was more waves, bigger waves than the sailors had ever seen in their lives. And you know what the men started to do? They got on their knees and they started praying. Why is this happening to us? Save us. And they were praying for their gods to save their lives. Well, that didn't actually help. Do you know why? Because the gods that they were praying to weren't real. Remember, God, the living God, is the true God. The people of Nineveh, they believed false gods. And even these people believed false gods. But there's a true and living God. And so they were really tugging on their ropes. And they went down to Jonah and they said, Jonah, why are you sleeping? We are in a storm. And Jonah got up and he thought, you know what? I know what's happening. He knew that God was trying to tell him something. And so they brought together all the men and they started talking about who could it be. And so they had this kind of method of figuring out who it would be. And they all started to point at Jonah. And they looked at Jonah and they said, Jonah, it's you. Why is it that this is happening to us? Why is it that all the storm is happening to us? What have you done? You know what? Jonah had to confess. He knew what he did. He was trying to hide from God. And you know what? He knew what the solution was. He said, for the waves to go away, you know what I want you to do? Throw me overboard. Throw me into the water where all those big waves were. And regrettably, that's what they did. They had no other solution. They picked Jonah up and they threw him into the waves. And Jonah, he was swimming, and all of a sudden, you cannot believe this, a big fish came and swallowed Jonah completely. Now, you may think, what? Yeah. Jonah was swallowed by a big fish. But you know who decided that? It was God. But Jonah didn't die. Nope. God wanted to preserve Jonah. Jonah was in the belly of the fish for many, many days. And God was moving the fish in a certain direction. And he was there for many days. And you know what happened? The big fish spit Jonah out. Well, where did he spit him? Close to Nineveh. And what God was trying to tell Jonah, and a lesson we should all learn, is that we can never hide from God. God always has a plan, and it will happen. And you know what? The Lord came to Jonah one more time, and he said to Jonah that I want you to go into Nineveh, and I want you to warn them that if they do not step away from their wickedness or repent from their wickedness, they'll be destroyed. You know what Jonah did? He went into Nineveh. He went in there and he would cry out, in 40 days, Nineveh will be destroyed. Wow, the people, they were, what? They couldn't believe what they were hearing. And he would go through all the streets. He'd tell them, in 40 days, if you do not turn away from your wickedness, this place will be destroyed. Well, when the king heard about this message, he became very aware, actually. He started to think to himself, you know what? He's right. Jonah's right. We are wicked. We have sinned. And he knew that he disobeyed God. And you know what? The king, he thought, you know what? I'm a man of war, but I have done many things wrong. And for his wickedness, he knew he had done wrong. And so he took off his garments and he was sorry to the Lord for what he did. He had repented for his sin. Just like Jonah's message was true about his sin. He knew it and he repented. And he got on his knees and he cried to the Lord for mercy. He would say, Lord, have mercy. And he pleaded to God to save them. You know what? The truth is, God is a merciful God. God is a merciful God, and he hears individuals. Why? Because he's a living God. And you know what? All the people, they gathered together and they did the same thing as their king. They realized what Jonah's message was true. They had sinned. They had done things that were wrong. But all of them got together and they repented. They were regretful for their sin. And they asked the Lord for mercy. They did not want their place to be destroyed. And you know what? It wasn't. God had shown mercy to each one of them. He never destroyed the place. Do you know why? He cared about them and they had turned away from their wickedness. Well, what's the lesson? Well, just like the people of Nineveh, we also need to repent of our sin. You know, the king, he had realized, I've sinned. I've done things that were wrong. And so likewise, we also need to understand that we have done something wrong. We have done many things wrong. We've sinned before God, and we need to repent of our sin, just like the king did. He asked the Lord for mercy, and that's what we need to do. And you know what? Just like Jonah had a message, God has a message for us. Jonah was sent into Nineveh. He had a message, and God has a message for each one of us. God's message is that if we repent of our sin and trust what Christ has done, he died on the cross for each one of us to take away our sin. That if we trust that and we repent from our sin and trust what Christ did on the cross for each one of us, then we can go to heaven. And so I want you to know that today, that you know what, there's a message for us. We need to repent from our sin, trust God, ask him for mercy, and that he will not bring judgment on us. And so if you trust Christ, what he has already done to take away our sin, we can go to heaven. So I hope you really enjoyed today's message. It's a great message. Remember, we cannot hide from God. We cannot hide our sin from God. And so we should repent of our sin and trust what Christ has already done so that we can go to heaven. So I hope you enjoyed today's Sunday School, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.